Now let's begin. Michael Garner had learned to read people in his 12 years as a forensic accountant. Not the clean corporate kind who testified in boardrooms. The kind who crawled through shell companies and offshore accounts for federal prosecutors. The kind who put mobsters and corrupt politicians behind bars by following money trails they thought they'd buried deep enough. He developed instincts that told him when numbers were lying, when spreadsheets were hiding something rotten underneath. Those same instincts had been screaming at him for the past 6 months about his brother-in-law. But he'd ignored them because Katie loved her brother, and Michael loved Katie more than he trusted his own paranoia. That was his first mistake. He met Katie Barrera 9 years ago at a charity gala where he'd been nursing a scotch and mentally calculating how much of the evening's donations would actually reach the children's hospital. She was there representing her family's restaurant supply business, wearing a green dress that matched her eyes. And when she caught him staring at the auction spreadsheet instead of the art, she'd laughed and said, "You must be fun at parties." They were married within a year. Austin came along 18 months later, a bright-eyed kid who inherited his mother's smile and his father's tendency to ask too many questions. Michael's work kept him sharp but isolated. Most friends drifted away when every dinner conversation risked veering into financial crimes. Tyler coolly stuck around. They'd gone through grad school together before Tyler chose the calmer path of teaching economics at the state university. Tyler understood that Michael's silences weren't rudeness. They were just his mind working through problems the way other people worried at crossword puzzles. Katie's family was different. Loud, warm, overwhelming. Her parents ran Barrera's, a restaurant supply distributor that had been in the family for 30 years. Every Sunday meant dinner at their sprawling house in the suburbs. The table loaded with her mother's cooking, the conversation a rapid-fire mix of Spanish and English. Michael had grown up an only child with parents who communicated in police nods, so the Barrera chaos had taken adjustment. He'd managed it, mostly, for Katie's sake. Then there was Sergio. Katie's younger brother by 3 years, Sergio Barrera had the kind of charm that made people overlook his complete lack of follow-through. He dropped out of college twice, burned through a series of jobs at the family business that ended when money started going missing from petty cash, though nothing was ever proven, and Katie's parents swept it under the rug with the excuse that Sergio was still finding himself. At 32, he lived in a converted garage apartment behind a friend's house, drove a car that somehow stayed nice despite his lack of income, and always had a story ready about the big opportunity that was just around the corner. Michael had run a background check. Not official, just enough to satisfy his curiosity. Sergio had been arrested twice. Once for possession with intent, charges dropped. Once for assault outside a bar. Victim declined to press charges. There were gaps in his employment history that didn't add up, cash deposits that suggested income from somewhere. Nothing concrete enough to bring to Katie, who would have accused him of being paranoid and controlling. So Michael watched, waited, and kept his suspicions to himself. That was his second mistake. The phone call came on a Tuesday. Michael was 3 hours into analyzing a labyrinth of wire transfers for a case involving a pyramid scheme that had bilked retirees out of their pensions. His office was a fortress of monitors and filing cabinets, the window overlooking downtown's gray February slush. Katie's voice cut through his concentration. "Michael, I have a huge favor to ask." She sounded stressed. Her assistant manager had called in sick, and one of their biggest clients was demanding a dinner meeting to discuss their contract renewal. "I know it's last minute, but could you pick up Austin from school? I won't be home until 9 or 10. Austin had chess club until 5. Michael checked his watch. He could leave by 4:30, grab the kid, order pizza, handle bedtime. Easy. No problem. I'll make it work. You're a lifesaver. Relief flooded her voice. Then, hesitation. Actually, Sergio called earlier. He offered to pick up Austin and keep him for the night. Said it would be good uncle-nephew bonding time. Michael's fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. "What? I know you're not his biggest fan, but he's been really making an effort lately. He got that job at the warehouse. He's been showing up to family dinners sober. Mom says he's turning over a new leaf." Katie's voice carried that defensive edge it always got when Michael questioned anything about her brother. Austin barely knows him. It might be good for them to spend time together. Every instinct Michael had developed screaming through financial fraud cases was now screaming in his gut. "Katie, no. I'll handle it." "Michael." She sighed. "He's my brother. He's trying. Can't you give him a chance? This was the fault line in their marriage, the one argument that recycled every few months. Katie saw family as sacred, bonds that couldn't break. Michael saw patterns and risks. They'd learned to navigate around it. Mostly, but this felt different. What does Austin want? Michael asked. I haven't asked him yet. But Sergio said they could go to that arcade place Austin's been wanting to try. You know we haven't had time. Guilt, then. The prosecutor in Michael recognized the manipulation. Katie was working 60-hour weeks managing the business side of her family's company while her parents semi-retired. Michael was drowning in case files. Austin spent most afternoons with the after-school program or at Tyler's house, where Tyler's husband made him do homework before letting him play video games. They'd been promising the arcade for months. Let me talk to Austin first, Michael said. If he wants to go, fine. But I want to know where they're going, and Sergio calls me by 9 to confirm everything's okay. Thank you. Katie's relief was palpable. I'll call Sergio now. Love you. Michael hung up and stared at his monitors, the wire transfers blurring into meaningless numbers. He pulled up a separate screen and typed in Sergio's name, running another search through the databases he had access to. Nothing new since his last check 3 months ago. Clean, at least on paper. At 4:15, Michael called Austin directly. The kid answered on the second ring, slightly breathless. Dad, we're doing the Queen's Gambit opening. Mr. Peterson says I'm getting really good at the endgame. That's great, buddy. Michael smiled despite himself. Hey, I have a question. Uncle Sergio wants to take you to GameWorks tonight. Arcade, dinner, maybe a sleepover at his place. You interested? Silence. Then, carefully, is Mom making me? Michael's stomach dropped. Why would you think that? Because Uncle Sergio's kind of. Austin trailed off. At 8, he was already learning which truths were acceptable to speak out loud. He's okay, I guess. But he talks about stuff I don't really get. And he smells weird. What kind of stuff? Like, grown-up stuff. About money and people being stupid. And he shows me videos on his phone that Mom probably wouldn't like. Austin's voice got smaller. I don't want to be mean. He's family. There it was. Michael could shut this down right now. Tell Katie he'd asked and Austin wasn't interested. But he could already hear her response. You turned him against Sergio. You poisoned our son against my family. You don't have to go if you don't want to, Michael said quietly. I can pick you up, and we'll order from that Thai place you like. But Mom wants me to go. Mom wants you to be happy. Another pause. The arcade does sound fun. And maybe Uncle Sergio's just trying to be nice. Austin was trying to convince himself. Okay, I'll go. But can you tell him I need to be home by lunchtime tomorrow? Tyler's taking me to the Science Museum. Deal, Michael said, even as his gut twisted. I'll call him right now and make sure he knows the rules. He hung up and immediately dialed Sergio. The phone rang 4 times before connecting. Michael, Katie said you'd call. Sergio's voice had that forced cheerfulness that set Michael's teeth on edge. This is great, man. I've been wanting to spend more time with my nephew. Here's how this works, Michael said flatly. You pick him up from school at 5. You go to GameWorks. You keep it PG. You have him call me by 8. He sleeps in a real bed, not on a couch. You drop him off at our house by noon tomorrow. Any deviation, any problem, and this is the last time you see him without Katie or me present. Wow, okay. Sergio laughed, but it sounded brittle. Didn't realize I was signing a contract. You're not. You're babysitting my son. Those are the terms. Right? Yeah, no problem. The cheerfulness faded. I'll take good care of him, Michael. He's family. He is, Michael agreed. That's why I'm trusting you with him. He ended the call and sat in the silence of his office, watching the city lights flicker on against the darkening sky. The wire transfers could wait. He opened a new file on his computer and began documenting everything. The phone calls, the arrangements, the timeline. Force of habit from years of building cases. If anything went wrong, he wanted a record. Nothing's going to go wrong, he told himself. You're being paranoid. But paranoia was just pattern recognition that hadn't proven itself yet. Katie came home at 10:30, exhausted but pleased. The client meeting had gone well. They'd signed a 2-year extension. She found Michael on the couch, laptop open, crime documentary playing on mute in the background. How was your night? She asked, kicking off her heels. Quiet. Austin called at 8:15. Said they were at the arcade, having fun. Sergio sounded sober. Michael didn't mention that Austin's voice had seemed off, too bright and performative. They were heading back to Sergio's place to watch a movie. Katie sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. See? Everything's fine. Sergio's really trying. Yeah, Michael said. Maybe he is. They went to bed at 11. Michael set his alarm for 7, planning to start coffee before Katie woke up, maybe make pancakes for when Austin got home. He fell asleep cataloging the day's wire transfers in his mind, numbers and accounts forming patterns in his subconscious. At 6:43, his phone shattered the darkness. Sergio's name flashed on the screen. Michael answered immediately. Michael. Sergio's voice was shaking. Something's wrong with Austin. He woke up throwing up, and he can't stop. I don't know what to do. Michael was already out of bed, pulling on jeans. Where are you? My place. He's in the bathroom. Jesus, there's so much. Call 911, Michael snapped. I'm on my way. Katie was awake now, fear sharp in her eyes. What happened? Austin's sick. Sergio's calling an ambulance. Michael grabbed his keys, his wallet, his phone. Meet me at St. Catherine's. The drive to Sergio's apartment should have taken 20 minutes. Michael made it in 12, running 2 red lights and pushing his sedan hard enough to make the engine whine. He found the ambulance already there, lights strobing against the pre-dawn gray. A paramedic was wheeling Austin out on a gurney, the boy's face pale and slick with sweat, an oxygen mask over his mouth. Dad, Austin whispered when he saw Michael. His eyes were glassy with fever and fear. I'm here, buddy. I'm right here. Michael gripped his son's hand, walking alongside the gurney. You're going to be okay. Sergio stood in the doorway of his garage apartment, wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, looking sick himself. I don't know what happened. He was fine last night, and then he just started puking around 6. I gave him water, but get in your car and follow us to the hospital, Michael said without looking at him. Katie will meet us there. The paramedic, a woman with kind eyes and efficient hands, was checking Austin's vitals. Has he eaten anything unusual in the last 24 hours? I don't know, Michael said. He was with his uncle. He turned to Sergio. What did you feed him? Pizza from Giorgio's. Just pepperoni, nothing weird. And some soda. Sergio was pale. We shared it. I feel fine. Any allergies we should know about? The paramedic asked Michael. No. He's never had issues with food before. They loaded Austin into the ambulance. Michael climbed in beside him, holding his son's hand while the vehicle screamed through the empty morning streets. Austin vomited twice more during the ride, painful dry heaves that produced only bile. His temperature was climbing, 102.3 when they arrived at St. Catherine's emergency department. The ER was a blur of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. A nurse took Austin's vitals while a doctor, Dr. Emma Dawson, according to her badge, asked rapid-fire questions. Michael answered everything he could, his mind cataloging details the way it did with financial documents, looking for the pattern that would explain this. We're going to run some tests, Dr. Dawson said. Blood work, urine sample, and I want to get an abdominal x-ray to rule out any obstructions. Obstructions? Michael felt the word like a punch. Kids sometimes swallow things. Toys, coins. Usually they pass without issue, but sometimes. She saw the look on Michael's face and softened her tone. It's just precautionary. We need to see what we're dealing with. Katie arrived as they were wheeling Austin to radiology. She looked like she'd thrown on whatever clothes were closest, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, no makeup, eyes red from crying during the drive. She grabbed Michael's arm. What's happening? They're running tests. X-ray, blood work. Michael pulled her close. He's stable. They'll figure it out. Sergio appeared in the waiting room, keeping his distance. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. Katie went to him immediately, and Michael watched his wife comfort her brother while Austin was somewhere in the hospital being scanned and prodded by strangers. 30 minutes later, Dr. Dawson emerged from the radiology wing. Her expression made Michael's blood run cold. Mr. Garner, Mrs. Garner, I need you to come with me. She glanced at Sergio. Just the parents, please. They followed her to a small consultation room. Dr. Dawson closed the door and pulled up images on a computer monitor. The X-ray showed Austin's small body in ghostly white and gray, his spine and ribs clearly visible. But there, in the area of his stomach, were 3 distinct bright white objects. What are those? Katie whispered. Dr. Dawson's voice was carefully controlled. They appear to be lithium button batteries. 3 of them. Michael stared at the screen. The batteries were clearly visible, small circles of dense metal sitting in his son's stomach like bombs. How? They're the kind used in remote controls, car key fobs, small electronics, Dr. Dawson continued. When I saw them, I immediately checked Austin's mouth and throat. There's chemical burning in his esophagus, and based on the positioning and his symptoms, these have been in his system for at least 8 to 10 hours. She turned to face them directly. Mr. and Mrs. Garner, children don't accidentally swallow 3 batteries. This is consistent with forced ingestion. The room tilted. Katie made a sound like a wounded animal. Someone made him swallow them. Michael heard his own voice from very far away. I've contacted hospital security and child protective services, which is mandatory in cases of suspected abuse. I've also called the police. Dr. Dawson's expression was compassionate but firm. We need to remove these batteries immediately. If they rupture or leak, the chemical damage could be catastrophic. He's being prepped for emergency endoscopy now. Katie was sobbing. Michael held her, his mind racing through the timeline. Pizza at Giorgio's. The arcade. Sergio's apartment. 8:15 phone call. Austin's voice too bright, performing normalcy. Somewhere between 8 and 6 a.m., someone had forced his 8-year-old son to swallow batteries. We need to know who had access to Austin last night, Dr. Dawson said gently. The police will want to question everyone involved. His uncle, Michael said. His voice sounded dead. Katie's brother. Sergio Barrera. He's in the waiting room. Dr. Dawson's eyes flickered with something, recognition, maybe, or confirmation. I'll let security know. Right now, you should be with Austin before the procedure. They let Michael and Katie into the prep room, where Austin lay on a gurney, small and fragile under the hospital blanket. And 4 ran into his arm, and the monitors beeped steadily. He was sedated but conscious, his eyes finding his parents. Dad, he whispered. I'm sorry. Michael's heart shattered. You have nothing to be sorry for, buddy. Nothing. Uncle Sergio said it was a game. Austin's words were slurred from the pre-op medication. He said, if I could swallow them, I'd win $100. But then it hurt. And he said if I told, you'd get in trouble. That people would take me away. Katie's knees buckled. Michael caught her while keeping his other hand on Austin's forehead. You did nothing wrong, Michael said, his voice shaking with a rage so pure it felt like ice. We're going to fix this, and you're going to be fine. The anesthesiologist arrived, and they had to step back as Austin was wheeled toward the operating suite. Michael watched his son disappear through double doors, then turned to find 2 police officers standing in the hallway. One of them, Detective Roger Friedman, older, with the weathered face of someone who'd seen too much, approached with his badge out. Mr. Garner? Mrs. Garner? I need to ask you some questions about last night. Michael looked past the detective to the waiting room, where Sergio was still sitting, head in his hands. Their eyes met across the distance. Sergio's face drained of color. He stood, taking a half step toward the exit. That's him, Michael said quietly. That's the man who hurt my son. Detective Friedman nodded to his partner, who moved to intercept Sergio. Michael watched as they approached, as Sergio's face cycled through confusion to fear to something that looked almost like relief. Like he'd been waiting for this moment. The detective's partner, a younger woman with alert eyes, spoke clearly. Sergio Barrera, we need you to come down to the station to answer some questions regarding Austin Garner. I didn't do anything, Sergio said immediately. The kid's making it up. He's confused. Then you won't mind answering our questions. The detective's voice left no room for argument. They walked Sergio out in handcuffs 20 minutes later, after he'd tried to run and nearly made it to the parking garage. Michael watched through the waiting room window as they loaded him into a patrol car. Katie was still in the consultation room, talking to a CPS worker. Michael stood alone, his reflection ghostly in the glass, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. He'd spent 12 years following money trails, building cases brick by brick until they were unassailable. He'd learned patience, learned how to see patterns others missed, learned how to build something so airtight that no lawyer could tear it apart. Sergio had hurt his son, had looked Austin in the eyes and forced him to swallow batteries, then threatened him into silence. And Michael had let it happen because he'd ignored his instincts, because he'd valued his marriage's peace over his gut's warnings. That ended now. Dr. Dawson found him an hour later. The procedure went well. We removed all 3 batteries. There's chemical damage to his esophagus and stomach lining, but we caught it in time. With proper treatment, he should make a full recovery. Can I see him? He's in recovery now. Another 30 minutes. Michael nodded. Thank you. He pulled out his phone and dialed Tyler coolly. His friend answered on the first ring. Michael? What's wrong? I need a favor, Michael said. A big one. And I need you not to ask questions. Tyler was silent for a moment. They'd known each other long enough that he could hear the dangerous calm in Michael's voice. What do you need? Everything you can find on Sergio Barrera. Employment records, associates, financials, criminal history beyond the official reports. I need to know everywhere he's been, everyone he knows, every dollar he's touched in the past 5 years. Michael, my son is in the hospital because that piece of shit fed him batteries and threatened him into silence, Michael said, his voice flat and precise. The police have him now, but I need to know what else they're going to find. And I need to know before they do. Another pause. I'll start now. Michael, be careful. I'm past careful, Michael said, and ended the call. Katie appeared in the hallway, her face blotchy from crying. She looked at Michael like she was seeing a stranger. The CPS worker said we need to do an interview. They're treating this as an active abuse investigation. Her voice broke. Michael, Sergio wouldn't. He couldn't. He did, Michael said simply. Austin told us what happened. The x-rays show it happened. Sergio ran when the police approached. These are facts, Katie. But why? She was pleading now, desperate for an explanation that would make the world make sense again. Why would he do this? Michael looked at his wife, this woman he loved, and saw her family's blind loyalty cracking in real time. He could tell her his suspicions, that Sergio wasn't just troubled, he was dangerous. That the missing petty cash and the dropped charges and the gaps in employment all pointed to something darker. That this wasn't random cruelty, but something calculated, something worse. But he didn't. Not yet. Because he was going to find out exactly what Sergio Barrera had been doing in the shadows. And when he had the full picture, when he understood every piece of the puzzle, he was going to dismantle the man who hurt his son so thoroughly that there wouldn't be enough left for the courts to bother with. I don't know, Michael lied. But we're going to find out. They sat with Austin in recovery, holding his hands as he woke from anesthesia. The boy was groggy and sore, but alive. Safe. For now. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Tyler, started digging. You're not going to like what I'm finding. Call me when you can. Michael deleted the message and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Katie was stroking Austin's hair, whispering to him that everything would be okay, that he was safe now. She was wrong. Safety was an illusion. Michael had learned that the hard way. But he was good at tearing apart illusions, at following the threads until he found the truth buried underneath. And when he found it, Sergio Barrera was going to wish the police had been the worst of his problems. Austin stayed in the hospital for 3 days. The chemical burns to his esophagus required careful monitoring, and the doctors wanted to ensure no complications developed. Michael took leave from work, setting up a makeshift office in Austin's room with his laptop and a secure connection to his work servers. Katie split her time between the hospital and managing her family business, though she moved through both like a ghost, her usual warmth dimmed by shock and grief. The police questioned Austin twice, with child psychologists present and cameras recording every word. He told them the same story each time, consistent and heartbreaking. Uncle Sergio had made it a game after they returned from the arcade. Said Austin was brave, that real men could do hard things. When Austin refused, Sergio had held him down, forced his mouth open, and made him swallow the batteries one by one. Then came the threats. If Austin told anyone, his dad would go to jail for something Sergio would make up. They'd take Austin away from his parents forever. It was a predator's playbook, wielding a child's worst fears like weapons. Detective Friedman shared what he could with Michael during brief hallway conversations. Sergio had lawyered up immediately, claiming Austin was lying, that the kid had swallowed the batteries on his own as some kind of attention-seeking behavior. The physical evidence contradicted him. The chemical burns showed forced ingestion. The timeline matched Austin's account. But Sergio's public defender was pushing for a psych evaluation, claiming mental illness. We've got him on child endangerment and abuse charges, Friedman said on the second day. Prosecutor's office is building the case. Given the physical evidence and Austin's testimony, they're confident about conviction. What kind of sentence? Michael asked. 5 to 10 years, likely. Maybe more if we can prove premeditation. Friedman studied Michael carefully. But I get the sense you're not satisfied with that. Michael kept his expression neutral. I want my son's abuser in prison for as long as possible. That's not what I mean. The detective's eyes were sharp. I've been doing this 23 years. I know what a parent looks like when they're thinking about taking matters into their own hands. I'm a forensic accountant, detective. I solve problems with spreadsheets, not violence. Friedman didn't look convinced. Here's some free advice. Whatever you're thinking, don't. Let the system work. Michael nodded, knowing the detective was right in theory. The system would work. Sergio would be convicted, sentenced, imprisoned. In 5 to 10 years, he'd walk free, and Michael's son would still wake up with nightmares about the night his uncle forced batteries down his throat. The system was designed for justice. Michael wanted something more permanent. Tyler called that evening while Katie was in the cafeteria. Michael stepped into the hallway, lowering his voice. Talk to me. Sergio's into some serious shit, Michael. Tyler sounded stressed, unusual for him. I pulled his financials like you asked. For a guy who supposedly works part-time at a warehouse, he's been depositing between $2,000 and $5,000 cash every month for the past 3 years. No clear source. Drugs. That was my first thought, but the pattern's wrong. Drug money's more irregular, smaller amounts. This is consistent. Almost like a salary. Tyler paused. I cross-referenced his associates. People he's been photographed with on social media, people tagged in his posts. One name kept coming up, Chad Hodge. Michael pulled out his own phone, searching the name. Who is he? That's where it gets interesting. Chad Hodge runs a private investigation firm, but they're not exactly licensed. The business operates out of a strip mall in the industrial district. I looked into their client list. It's shell companies and cash transactions. No legitimate paper trail. What kind of investigations? The kind that don't end up in court, Tyler said grimly. I found some sealed records through a contact in the clerk's office. Hodge has been sued twice for invasion of privacy, once for blackmail. The cases were settled out of court with NDAs. Michael's mind was already racing ahead, connecting dots. Sergio was working for him. Looks like it. I found emails between them going back 2 years. They're careful, nothing explicitly incriminating, but the implication is clear. Sergio was doing surveillance work. Following people, taking photos, gathering information. Blackmail, Michael said quietly. That'd be my guess. And here's the kicker. 3 weeks ago, Sergio emailed Hodge about a new opportunity that would set them up for years. Said he had access to someone whose secrets were worth 6 figures. Michael's blood ran cold. Did he name the target? No. But the timeline matches up with when he started getting more involved with your family. Sunday dinners, offering to babysit. Tyler trailed off. Michael, I think Sergio was setting you up. The hallway seemed to tilt. Michael leaned against the wall, processing. He'd assumed Sergio hurt Austin out of sadism or mental illness. But this suggested something worse, calculation. Premeditation. Setting me up for what? I don't know yet. But think about what you do. You investigate financial crimes for prosecutors. You have access to sealed case files, witness lists, offshore account information. You know where bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking. Tyler's voice was urgent. If someone wanted leverage over you, hurting Austin would be the perfect pressure point. He forced my son to swallow batteries to extort me? Michael felt rage crystallizing into something colder, sharper. I don't have proof yet, but the pattern fits. Sergio hurts Austin, then offers to help you in exchange for information, or threatens to hurt him again if you don't cooperate. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Michael, what cases are you working on right now? Michael thought about his current caseload. 3 pyramid scheme prosecutions, 2 tax evasion cases, 1 RICO investigation. Standard work. Then he remembered the file he'd just been assigned last month, the one that required federal security clearance to even access. The Donovan case. Senator Patricia Donovan was under investigation for accepting bribes from a pharmaceutical company in exchange for favorable legislation. The case was being built quietly, no public knowledge yet. Michael had been brought in to trace the money through a dozen shell companies spread across 4 countries. If the case went to trial, it would end Donovan's career and send her to prison. If someone knew Michael was involved, if they had leverage over him. Jesus, Michael whispered. What? There's a case. High profile. Political. If someone wanted to know details before they went public, wanted to get ahead of an investigation. He couldn't say more, not over the phone. Tyler, I need everything you can find on Chad Hodge. Client lists, associates, anyone who might have hired him for this. And I need it yesterday. I'm on it. But Michael, seriously, be careful. If these people were willing to hurt Austin once, they won't get the chance again, Michael said, his voice flat and final. I'm done being careful. He ended the call and stood in the hospital hallway, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and felt the last pieces of his old life, the one where he trusted systems and followed rules, fall away completely. The door to Austin's room opened. Katie emerged, her eyes red. He's asking for you. Michael pushed off the wall and went to his son, who was sitting up in bed looking small and lost. Dad, Austin's voice was barely a whisper. Am I in trouble? Michael sat on the edge of the bed and pulled his son into a careful hug, mindful of the 4 lines. No, buddy, you're not in trouble. You didn't do anything wrong. But I swallowed the batteries. Uncle Sergio said it was my choice. Uncle Sergio lied. Michael pulled back to look Austin in the eyes. What he did to you was wrong. None of this is your fault. Do you understand? Austin nodded, but Michael could see the doubt there. The way trauma rewrote a child's understanding of cause and effect. It would take years to undo this damage. Years of therapy and reassurance and love. Michael would make sure Sergio paid for every single one of those years. Katie stayed with Austin while Michael made his excuses about needing to check on work matters. He drove home in the evening dark, his mind cataloging everything Tyler had told him. At home, he locked himself in his home office and began pulling threads. Chad Hodge's investigative firm had a website, professionally designed but vague about actual services. Discrete solutions for complex problems. No client testimonials, no case studies. Just a contact form and a phone number. Michael ran the business registration. It was an LLC formed 3 years ago, registered to a P.O. box. The listed principals were Hodge and 2 other names, Jeremy Williamson and Marcos Perkins. He searched each name. Williamson had a record, wire fraud, served 18 months 5 years ago. Perkins was cleaner on paper, but Michael found his name associated with a defunct private security company that had been sued for illegal wiretapping. These weren't investigators. They were criminals offering criminal services under a business license. Michael pulled Sergio's phone records. Tyler had sent them encrypted and found regular calls to Hodge's number going back 18 months. The frequency increased dramatically 3 weeks ago, right around when Sergio had started showing up at family dinners more often. One number appeared in Sergio's records that didn't match any of Hodge's associates, a DC area code. Michael traced it to a burner phone, inactive now. But the pattern of calls was telling. 5 calls in 2 weeks, each lasting under 2 minutes, all in the evenings. The last call was made 4 days before Sergio babysat Austin. Someone in DC had contacted Sergio multiple times, then stopped right before the incident. Coordination. Planning. Michael sat back in his chair, staring at the web of connections spreading across his monitors. This wasn't just Sergio being a sadistic asshole. This was organized. Someone had hired Hodge. Hodge had deployed Sergio, and Austin had been the leverage point to get to Michael's case files. The Donovan investigation. It had to be. He pulled up everything he had on Senator Donovan's case, careful to use his secure work connection. The money trail he'd been following led to a pharmaceutical company called MediLife Solutions. They'd funneled bribes through a charity Donovan controlled, millions of dollars disguised as donations. In exchange, Donovan had pushed legislation that would fast-track MediLife's experimental drugs through FDA approval, bypassing safety trials. People had died from those drugs. Not many, 4 documented cases, but enough that the FDA had started asking questions. That's what had triggered the investigation. If Donovan knew the case was being built against her, if she knew Michael was the one tracing the money, she'd want a way to stop him. Threatening his son would do it. Either Michael would back off and destroy evidence, or they'd use Austin's suffering to discredit him as a witness, claim he was unstable, unreliable, motivated by vengeance rather than facts. Either way, the case against Donovan would collapse. Michael's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Garner? A man's voice, smooth and professional. My name is Jeremy Williamson. I work with Chad Hodge. I believe we have a mutual interest in resolving a delicate situation. Michael's hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? Please. We're professionals. We've been watching you for some time. Williamson sounded almost amused. I'm calling as a courtesy. Your brother-in-law made a mistake. He was supposed to simply remind you that your son is vulnerable. Instead, he got creative. That wasn't part of our agreement with our client. Who's your client? You're a smart man, Mr. Garner. I'm sure you've already figured that out. A pause. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to develop sudden memory problems regarding certain financial documents related to a certain senator. Files will go missing. Your testimony will become unreliable. And in exchange, nothing else happens to your family. And if I refuse, then we finish what Sergio started. But slower, more painful. And we won't stop with Austin. Williamson's voice turned cold. We know where your wife works. We know her schedule. We know she takes the same route home every night at 9:15. Accidents happen, Mr. Garner. Michael's vision narrowed to a single point. You're making a mistake. No, you are, if you think you have a choice here. You have 48 hours to start making files disappear. We'll be in touch with specific documents. The line went dead. Michael sat in the silence of his office, rage and fear warring in his chest. They'd threatened Katie. They'd already heard Austin. And they thought they could leverage him into destroying evidence that would put a corrupt senator in prison. They'd miscalculated badly. Michael opened a new encrypted file on his computer and began to plan. Not a legal plan. That time was past. These people operated outside the law, and the law would take years to catch up to them, if it ever did. By then, his family would be dead, and Donovan would have destroyed all evidence of her crimes. No, this needed to be handled the way financial investigations were handled. Follow the money, find the weak points, and apply pressure until everything collapsed. He pulled up everything Tyler had sent on Chad Hodge. The investigator had made one crucial mistake. His business was profitable, verifiably profitable, with accounts and payroll and tax records, which meant Michael could trace it, map it, and dismantle it. And somewhere in that process, he'd find Hodge, Williamson, Perkins, and whoever else had thought hurting an 8-year-old boy was acceptable business practice. They'd threatened his son. They'd threatened his wife. They'd given Michael 48 hours to comply. They should have given him less time. 48 hours was more than enough for a forensic accountant to burn someone's entire world to ash. Michael began typing, his fingers flying across the keyboard, building the case that would destroy everyone who'd touched his family. This time, he wasn't building it for prosecutors or courts. He was building it for himself. And when he was done, Sergio Barrera and his employers would understand that some people shouldn't be threatened. Some people were much more dangerous when you backed them into a corner. Austin came home on the 4th day, subdued and quiet. His throat still hurt, and he needed medication every 4 hours to manage the healing burns in his esophagus. Katie set up the guest room on the 1st floor so he wouldn't have to manage stairs, and Michael took another week off work, officially to care for his son, actually to execute the plan that had been taking shape in his mind. Tyler came by the 2nd evening with files on a thumb drive. They sat in Michael's home office while Katie read to Austin in the other room. "This is everything I could find," Tyler said, handing over the drive. "Hodge's business records, client communications, financial transactions. Some of it I got through, less than legal means. If you use this, you can't tell anyone where it came from. I won't need to." Michael plugged in the drive and began scanning files. "By the time I'm done, the evidence will lead back to them without anything traceable to you." "Michael." Tyler's voice was serious. "What exactly are you planning?" "Justice." "That's not an answer." Michael looked at his oldest friend. "They threatened Katie. They hurt Austin. They're expecting me to roll over and let them win because I'm too scared or too civilized to fight back." He turned back to the monitor. "They profiled me wrong. They saw a guy who works in an office and assumed I'd be easy to control. They forgot what I actually do." "What's that?" "I dismantle criminal empires for a living. I find their money, trace it back to the source, and build cases that send people to prison for decades." Michael's voice was calm, almost conversational. "The only difference now is I'm not building the case for prosecutors. I'm building it for personal use." Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "You're going to do something illegal. I'm going to do what's necessary. There's a difference." "Not anymore." Michael pulled up one of the files, a spreadsheet showing Hodge's income sources over the past 3 years. "Look at this. Hodge has been taking money from 5 different shell companies, all registered in Delaware, all with fake directors. The money originates from a trust controlled by Senator Donovan's campaign manager. This isn't just blackmail. It's political corruption on a federal level. Then take it to the FBI. And wait 2 years for them to build a case while these people hurt my family. Michael shook his head. No. I'm going to do what they taught me in every prosecution I've ever worked. Find the weak link and make them flip. He pulled up another file, this one showing phone records. Sergio's scared. He didn't expect to get caught, and now he's facing real prison time. His lawyer's trying to get him a deal, but the prosecutor's office doesn't need his testimony. They have Austin's statement and physical evidence. Sergio has no leverage. So I'm going to give him some. Michael's fingers flew across the keyboard. I'm going to make him an offer. He testifies against Hodge, Williamson, and everyone else involved in this conspiracy, and I'll make sure certain financial discrepancies in his arrest don't get noticed. What financial discrepancies? The ones I'm about to create. Michael pulled up Sergio's bank records. See these cash deposits? Right now they look like drug money or blackmail payments. But if I adjust a few dates, cross-reference them with some legitimate payments from his warehouse job, and create a paper trail showing he was actually being paid by Hodge for surveillance work, suddenly Sergio becomes a low-level employee rather than a co-conspirator. Tyler stared at him. You're going to falsify evidence. I'm going to reframe existing evidence in a way that benefits my purposes, Michael corrected. Every transaction is real. I'm just reorganizing the narrative. That's still illegal. So is threatening to kill my wife. Michael's voice went cold. I'm not interested in moral high ground anymore, Tyler. I'm interested in results. Sergio flips on Hodge, Hodge flips on Donovan, and the whole operation collapses. My family stays safe, and everyone who hurt Austin goes to prison for a very long time. Tyler ran a hand through his hair. And if this backfires? If you get caught? I won't. Michael gestured to the screens around them. I've spent 12 years watching criminals try to hide their money. I know every mistake they make because I've seen them make it hundreds of times. I'm better at this than they are, and I'm motivated in a way they can't understand. Because they hurt Austin. Because they made it personal. Michael closed the files and looked at Tyler. I need to know if you're with me on this. If you're not, that's okay. I'll figure it out alone. But I need to know now. Tyler was quiet for a long time, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Finally, he sighed. I'm in. But only because I know you'll do it anyway. And at least this way I can try to keep you from completely destroying your life. He held up a hand before Michael could respond. But we do this smart. We plan every step. And the second it looks like it's going sideways, we stop. Agreed. Agreed, Michael lied. They spent the next 3 hours going through every file, mapping out connections, building a timeline of who knew what and when. By the end, they had a clear picture. Senator Donovan had hired Chad Hodge to neutralize Michael's investigation. Hodge had deployed Sergio, who'd improvised the battery incident. Now Sergio was arrested, Hodge was exposed, and Donovan was vulnerable. The phone call from Williamson had been a panic move, trying to salvage the operation. That meant they were scared. Good. Fear made people sloppy. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. 24 hours left. Hope you're making progress on those files. He showed it to Tyler. They're getting impatient. Let them wait. Tyler pulled up a new file. I found something else you need to see. Hodge has been making regular payments to someone called Marcos Perkins. According to the records, Perkins handles technical solutions. Michael searched the name again, pulling up more information. Perkins had a background in IT security, worked for a defense contractor until he was fired for unauthorized access to classified systems. After that, he'd gone private, offering his skills to whoever paid. He's their hacker, Michael said. That's how they got my phone number. How they know Katie's schedule. Can you trace what he's accessed? Michael pulled up his own system logs, running a diagnostic. There, hidden processes, data being copied to an external server. His stomach dropped. They're in my home network. They've been monitoring my email, my files, everything. For how long? At least 3 weeks. Michael felt a chill. They'd been watching him this whole time, seeing his case notes on the Donovan investigation, watching him plan Austin's birthday party, reading private messages between him and Katie. Tyler saw his expression. We need to shut it down. No. Michael's mind was racing. We need to feed them false information. Make them think I'm complying. He spent the next hour creating fake files, documents that looked like case notes on the Donovan investigation, but were actually filled with incorrect information and dead ends. He copied them to the locations being monitored, then sent an email to his work account, one he knew Perkins was watching, detailing his plan to start deleting files tomorrow. "They'll see this and think I'm cooperating," Michael explained to Tyler. "It buys us time while they're congratulating themselves." Meanwhile, the real case files were being copied to encrypted drives and hidden in locations Perkins couldn't access. Michael was setting up a mirror network, showing Hodges' people exactly what they wanted to see while the actual investigation continued in secret. "This is elaborate," Tyler said, watching Michael work. "It has to be. These people are professionals. If I just roll over, they'll know something's wrong." Michael finished the setup and sat back. Now we wait for them to make their next move. The next move came at 2 in the morning. Michael's phone rang with another unknown number. Mr. Garner. A different voice this time, older and rougher. Chad Hodge himself. "I've reviewed your progress. I'm satisfied you understand your situation." Michael had prepared for this call. "I want assurances. If I do this, my family is off limits. Permanently. Of course. We're businessmen, not monsters." Hodge actually sounded offended. "Once the files are gone and your testimony becomes unreliable, we have no further interest in you." "What about Sergio?" "What about him? He's facing charges. If he talks." "He won't." Hodge's confidence was absolute. "Sergio knows what happens to people who talk to police. He'll take the plea deal, serve his time quietly, and keep his mouth shut. And if he doesn't, then he'll have an unfortunate accident in county lockup." Stated so casually, like they were discussing the weather. "But I don't think you need to worry about that, Mr. Garner. Just focus on your end. 48 hours. Don't disappoint me." The line went dead. Michael sat in the darkness, processing. Hodge was planning to have Sergio killed if he became a liability, which meant Sergio was even more vulnerable than Michael had thought. That vulnerability was an opportunity. The next morning, Michael drove to the county jail. He'd called ahead, arranging a visit with Sergio using his credentials as a victim's family member. The guards led him to a private consultation room, usually reserved for attorney meetings. Sergio looked terrible. Orange jumpsuit hanging off his thin frame, eyes sunken and bloodshot, hands shaking when the guard removed the cuffs. He sat across from Michael with the table between them and wouldn't meet his eyes. "Katie doesn't know I'm here," Michael said quietly. "This conversation is between us." Sergio finally looked up. "Come to gloat." "No. I came to offer you a deal. I've already got a lawyer." "Not that kind of deal." Michael leaned forward. "I know who you work for. Chad Hodge, Jeremy Williamson, Marcos Perkins. I know they hired you to leverage me through Austin, and I know they're planning to have you killed before you can testify against them." Sergio's face went pale. "You don't know shit. Hodge called me. Told me you'd keep quiet or have an accident." Those were his exact words. Michael pulled out his phone, playing a recording of the conversation. He'd started recording every call from unknown numbers after Williamson's threat. Sergio listened to Hodge's voice, the casual discussion of his potential murder, and something broke in his eyes. "What do you want?" he whispered. "I want everything," Michael said. "Names, dates, communications. Who hired Hodge, how much they paid, what the plan was. You testify against all of them, and I'll make sure you survive long enough to see trial. They'll kill me the second I open my mouth. Not if they're too busy defending themselves from federal charges." Michael pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. "This is what I've built so far. Financial records showing Hodge's payments from Senator Donovan's campaign. Wire transfers that violate federal bribery laws. Enough to trigger an FBI investigation that will put everyone involved under surveillance." Sergio opened the folder, scanning the documents. His hands were shaking. "Where did you get this?" "I'm a forensic accountant. Getting financial records is what I do." Michael's voice was hard. "Right now, you're facing 5 to 10 years on child abuse charges. You'll do your time, get out, maybe rebuild your life. But if you help me take down Hodge and everyone above him, I can get you a deal. Testify, enter witness protection, and you'll never see the inside of a federal prison." "Witness protection?" Sergio looked up, searching Michael's face for the lie. "You'll disappear. New name, new city, new life. Away from everyone who wants you dead." Michael paused. "Or you stay quiet, take your chances in county lockup, and hope Hodge's people don't get to you before trial. Your choice." It wasn't really a choice, and they both knew it. Sergio stared at the documents, at the evidence of the conspiracy he'd been a small part of, and Michael watched him understand just how expendable he was to the people he'd been working for. I need guarantees, Sergio said finally. Real ones. Not just your word. I'll get you a federal prosecutor. Someone outside the local DA's office who has the authority to make deals. Michael stood. But I need your answer now. Are you in or out? Sergio looked at him with something that might have been desperation or might have been hatred. If I do this, Katie will never forgive me. Your whole family will hate me forever. You forced my 8-year-old son to swallow batteries, Michael said flatly. We already hate you. This is about survival now. Yours and mine. Sergio closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were resigned. I'm in. Good. Michael pulled out a small recording device. Start talking. Everything, from the beginning. For the next 2 hours, Sergio talked. He described being approached by Jeremy Williamson 6 months ago, offered steady money to do surveillance work. At first it was simple. Follow cheating spouses, photograph business meetings, standard private investigator stuff. Then Williamson introduced him to Chad Hodge, who offered him more money for more specialized work. They'd identified Michael as a target 3 months ago, after Donovan's campaign manager reached out to Hodge. The senator needed the investigation stopped, and they profiled Michael as the weak point. A family man, devoted father, someone who could be controlled through threats to his loved ones. Sergio had been tasked with getting close to the family, gathering information, looking for opportunities. The battery incident had been his own idea, a way to prove his value to Hodge. He'd thought it would scare Michael into compliance. I didn't think it would hurt him that bad, Sergio said, his voice hollow. I just thought he'd swallow them and then throw them up or pass them. I didn't know about the chemical burns. Michael's fists clenched under the table, but he kept his expression neutral. Keep going. Sergio described the larger operation. Hodge had other operatives working different angles. Marcos Perkins had hacked Michael's home network. Williamson was handling the threats and negotiations. And behind it all was Senator Donovan's chief of staff, a man named Roger Friedman. Michael's blood froze. Wait, Roger Friedman? Yeah. What? There's a detective Roger Friedman investigating your case. Sergio blinked. Shit. Is that a coincidence? Michael stood abruptly. Or the same person? He pulled out his phone, searching for Detective Friedman's background. The man had introduced himself as having 23 years of experience. Weathered face, seemed too much. But Michael hadn't verified anything. He'd been in shock, trusting that a badge meant honesty. The database search came back with results that made his stomach drop. Detective Roger Friedman, 23 years on the force, recently under internal investigation for evidence tampering. Investigation quietly closed due to lack of proof. Same Roger Friedman who'd been photographed at a Donovan campaign fundraiser 2 years ago. Same Roger Friedman who was now in charge of Sergio's arrest, with access to all evidence, all witness statements, all case files. We need to go, Michael said urgently. Right now. What's wrong? The detective investigating you is on Donovan's payroll, which means everything you've told the police has been fed back to Hodge. Michael was already signaling for the guard. They know Austin's testimony, they know the evidence, and they're probably planning to make it all disappear. Sergio's face went white. If Friedman's dirty, then I'm dead. He can arrange my death and cover it up as a suicide or a gang hit. Not if we move first. Michael's mind was racing through options. He needed to get this information to someone clean, someone outside Friedman's reach. I'm getting you a federal prosecutor today. We bypass the entire local system and take this straight to the FBI. The guard opened the door. Michael leaned close to Sergio before leaving. Don't talk to anyone. Not your lawyer, not the guards, especially not Friedman. Someone asks you questions, you say nothing until the feds arrive. Understand? Sergio nodded, looking more terrified than Michael had ever seen him. Good. Fear would keep him alive. Michael left the jail and immediately called Tyler from his car. We have a problem. The detective on Sergio's case is dirty. He's feeding information back to Donovan's people. Michael was driving too fast, weaving through traffic. I need you to find me a federal prosecutor. Someone with jurisdiction over political corruption cases, someone based out of a different district, someone clean. Jesus. Tyler was already typing. Okay, there's a U.S. attorney in the Eastern District, Amanda Foster. She's built her career prosecuting political corruption. Clean record. No ties to local police or Donovan's network. Give me a meeting with her. Today. Use whatever connections you have. I'll try. But Michael, the feds don't move that fast. Make them move fast. Tell them I have evidence of a sitting senator ordering a child's torture to obstruct a federal investigation. That should get their attention. 3 hours later, Michael was sitting in a conference room at the federal building downtown, facing U.S. Attorney Amanda Foster and 2 FBI agents. He'd brought encrypted copies of all the financial records, recordings of the phone calls from Hodge and Williamson, and Sergio's full confession. Foster was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and skeptical. She'd built her reputation on taking down corrupt politicians, and she didn't suffer fools or time wasters. She listened to Michael's presentation without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When he finished, she sat back and studied him. This is one hell of an accusation, Mr. Garner. You're claiming a sitting U.S. senator orchestrated a criminal conspiracy that included child abuse, blackmail, and obstruction of justice. I'm claiming I have evidence of it, Michael corrected. Everything in those files is verifiable. The money trails, the communications, the connections between Hodge, Friedman, and Donovan's campaign. My brother-in-law is willing to testify in exchange for witness protection. Your brother-in-law who currently faces serious charges for abusing your son. Foster's expression was carefully neutral. Some prosecutors might see this as a father seeking revenge using fabricated evidence. The financial records aren't fabricated. You can verify every transaction with the banks. The recordings aren't fabricated. Your tech people can authenticate them. And Sergio's testimony can be corroborated with phone records and surveillance footage. Michael met her eyes. I'm a forensic accountant. I build cases that stand up in court. This one will stand. One of the FBI agents, a younger woman named Torres, leaned forward. Even if everything you've presented is genuine, moving against a sitting senator requires absolute certainty. We'd need more than financial records and a coerced confession from a child abuser. Then get it, Michael said. Put Sergio in protective custody, wire him up, and send him back to make contact with Hodge. They think he's contained, that Friedman has him under control. He can get them to talk, confirm the conspiracy on record. Foster and Torres exchanged looks. The third person in the room, FBI agent Zachary Blackburn, spoke for the first time. That's extremely risky. If Hodge suspects Sergio's cooperating, he'll have him killed immediately. If Sergio stays in county lockup with Friedman in charge, he'll be killed anyway, Michael countered. This way, at least you get evidence before they act. Foster was quiet for a long moment, weighing the decision. Finally, she nodded. We'll do it, but not the way you described. We're going to pull Sergio into federal custody tonight, quietly, before Friedman knows he's gone. We'll debrief him fully, verify his testimony, and then decide on next steps. She fixed Michael with a hard stare. And you're going to step back and let us handle this. No more vigilante investigations, no more recording conversations without authorization. You've brought us evidence. Now you let the professionals take over. Michael wanted to argue, but he recognized this was the best deal he'd get. Fine, but I want protection for my family. If Hodge figures out Sergio's gone, we'll have agents watching your house and your wife's workplace, Blackburn said. Standard protective surveillance until we've secured all the suspects. When will that be? If everything you've given us checks out? 72 hours. Foster stood, signaling the meeting was over. Go home, Mr. Garner. Be with your son. Let us do our jobs. Michael left the federal building as the sun was setting, feeling the weight of the past week pressing down on him. He'd set things in motion that couldn't be stopped now. The FBI would investigate, and if they moved fast enough, everyone who'd hurt Austin would face justice. But the fear remained. 72 hours was a long time. Anything could happen. He drove home to find Katie in the kitchen making dinner, trying to maintain normalcy for Austin's sake. The boy was in the living room, watching cartoons with the volume low, still moving gingerly because of his healing throat. Where were you? Katie asked. She looked exhausted. Meeting with federal prosecutors. Michael kept his voice low. The case against Sergio is bigger than we thought. There are other people involved, important people. The FBI is taking over the investigation. Katie's eyes widened. What are you talking about? So Michael told her everything. Not the parts about his own illegal investigation or the files Tyler had stolen, but the rest. The conspiracy, Senator Donovan, Hodge's operation, Detective Friedman's involvement. He watched her face cycle through disbelief, horror, and finally, rage. "They used my brother to get to you," she said when he finished. "They used our son as leverage." "Yes." And Sergio knew. He knew it would hurt Austin, and he did it anyway. Michael nodded. He did it for money, and because they told him to. He's cooperating now, but that doesn't change what he did. Katie was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. "I defended him. For years, I made excuses for him, and this whole time he was." Michael pulled her into his arms. "It's not your fault. He's my brother. He made his choices." Michael held her while she cried, and over her shoulder, he watched Austin on the couch, small and vulnerable, the boy who'd survived something he should never have experienced. 72 hours felt like forever. The next morning, the FBI executed coordinated raids across the city. They hit Chad Hodges' office, Jeremy Williamson's apartment, Marcos Perkins's house, and Detective Roger Friedman's home. All of them were arrested simultaneously, no warning, no chance to destroy evidence. Michael watched the news coverage from his living room, Austin asleep against his shoulder. The anchors were breathless with excitement. Breaking news: FBI arrests 4 men in connection with alleged plot to obstruct federal investigation. Sources say a sitting U.S. senator may be implicated. By afternoon, Senator Patricia Donovan's office released a statement denying any knowledge of the conspiracy and pledging full cooperation with investigators. By evening, leaked documents, Michael recognized some of his own financial analysis, were circulating online, showing clear connections between Donovan's campaign and Hodges' operation. By the next morning, Donovan announced she was taking a leave of absence from Senate duties to focus on her health. Political code for preparing for indictment. Tyler came over that evening with champagne. "You did it. You actually brought down a senator." "The FBI brought her down," Michael said, but he accepted the drink. "I just gave them the map." "You gave them more than that." Tyler clinked glasses with him. "You gave them a case they couldn't ignore. Donovan's career is over, and everyone who touched Austin is going to prison." Katie was upstairs putting Austin to bed. Michael waited until he heard her footsteps on the stairs before asking the question that had been eating at him. "What happens to Sergio?" Tyler's expression sobered. "Witness protection, like you promised. He testified in front of the grand jury today. His testimony, combined with the physical evidence and the wiretaps they got from Perkins's computers, sealed the case. Donovan, Hodge, Williamson, Perkins, and Friedman are all facing federal conspiracy charges. RICO predicates, the works. And Sergio just walks away? He'll do time for what he did to Austin. But it'll be in federal prison, lower security, and the sentence will be reduced for cooperation. 5 years, maybe less with good behavior." Tyler saw Michael's expression. "I know it's not enough." "It's never going to be enough," Michael said quietly. "He hurt my son. 5 years, 50 years, it doesn't matter. Austin will carry this for the rest of his life." They sat in silence, drinking champagne that tasted like ash. 2 days later, the grand jury returned indictments. Senator Patricia Donovan was charged with bribery, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and conspiracy to commit child abuse. The last charge was unusual. Donovan's lawyers would argue she never directly ordered the battery incident, but the prosecutors included it to show the full scope of her conspiracy. Chad Hodge, Jeremy Williamson, and Marcos Perkins were all charged with child abuse, blackmail, wiretapping, and conspiracy. Detective Roger Friedman faced additional charges of evidence tampering and abuse of authority. The news dominated headlines for weeks. Senators fall from grace. Corruption case rocks Capitol. FBI uncovers child abuse conspiracy. Michael stopped watching after the first few days. The story wasn't about him or Austin anymore. It had become political theater. Austin slowly healed, physically at least. His throat recovered, the chemical burns fading to scar tissue that doctors said would barely be noticeable in a few years. But the nightmares were worse. He woke up screaming most nights, and Katie would hold him while he cried about Uncle Sergio and the game that hurt him. Michael sat in on the first therapy session, listening to the child psychologist explain trauma and recovery and the long road ahead. Austin would be okay eventually, but it would take time. Years, probably. And through it all, Michael carried the knowledge of what he'd been willing to do. The illegal surveillance, the falsified documents, the willingness to step outside every law and principle he'd built his career on. He'd gotten lucky, The FBI had taken over before he'd had to cross lines he couldn't come back from. But he knew, and it terrified him a little, that he would have crossed those lines. Would have done anything, broken any rule, become any kind of monster necessary to protect his family. The trials began 8 months later. Michael testified at Donovan's trial, walking the jury through the financial evidence that proved her involvement. It took 3 days to present his analysis, showing how millions of dollars had flowed from MediLife Solutions through shell companies to Donovan's charity, and how those same patterns appeared in the payments to Chad Hodge. Donovan's lawyers tried to argue that she'd been unaware of her campaign's actions, but the jury didn't buy it. The financial trail was too clear, too deliberate. When Sergio testified about being hired to hurt Austin as leverage, the courtroom went silent. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Hodge, Williamson, and Perkins all took plea deals, agreeing to testify against each other in exchange for reduced sentences. They'd still spend decades in federal prison, but they avoided life sentences. Detective Friedman went to trial and lost spectacularly. The evidence of his involvement was overwhelming, and his abuse of his position made him especially unsympathetic. 40 years in federal prison, no parole. Sergio got 7 years, reduced from 15 for cooperation. He was transferred to a minimum security facility in another state, part of the witness protection arrangement. Katie didn't attend his sentencing. She'd cut all contact with him after learning the full extent of his betrayal. Michael did attend. He sat in the back of the courtroom and watched Sergio stand before the judge, looking small and broken, and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, not even anger. Just emptiness where his brother-in-law used to exist in his life. Sergio glanced back once before being led away. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Michael didn't look away, didn't give him anything. Sergio was going to prison, and that was as it should be, but it didn't undo the damage. Didn't give Austin back his innocence. That night, Michael found Austin in his room, building with Legos. The boy looked up when he entered. "Dad, is it over?" Michael sat on the edge of the bed. "The trials are done. The bad people are going to prison. All of them. All of them." Austin was quiet for a moment, placing a red brick carefully on his structure. "I still have nightmares sometimes." "I know, buddy. The doctor says that's normal, that it'll get better." Austin looked up, his eyes older than an 8-year-old should be. "Does it really get better?" Michael thought about lying, about offering easy comfort. But Austin deserved truth, even hard truth. "It gets different," he said carefully. "The nightmares will be less frequent. You'll think about it less often. But you'll always remember what happened, and that's okay. It's part of who you are now. I don't want it to be part of who I am." "I know." Michael pulled his son close. "But here's what I've learned. The bad things that happen to us don't define us. What defines us is what we do afterward. You survived something terrible, and you told the truth about it even when you were scared. That took courage. That's what defines you. Not what Uncle Sergio did, but how brave you were afterward." Austin thought about this. "Did you do something brave too?" "I did what I had to do to protect our family." "Was it hard?" "The hardest thing I've ever done." Michael pulled back to look Austin in the eyes. "But you were worth it. You and your mom, you're worth anything." Austin hugged him tight, and they sat like that for a long time, father and son, survivors of different kinds of trauma, holding on to each other in the quiet of the evening. Later, after Austin was asleep, Michael went to his office and opened the encrypted files one last time. Everything he'd gathered, all the evidence and recordings and financial analysis, was backed up in secure locations. The FBI had their copies, the prosecutors had theirs, but Michael kept his own record. Not for revenge. Not anymore. Just as a reminder of what he was capable of when his family was threatened. He closed the files and deleted his access, wiping the encryption keys. That chapter was over. Katie found him sitting in the dark, staring at blank monitors. "You okay?" she asked softly. "Getting there." He turned to face her. "We're going to be okay. All of us." She sat in his lap, resting her head on his shoulder. "I know. It just doesn't feel like it yet. It will." Michael held her, and he believed it. The scars were there, would always be there, but they would heal. They were already healing. 3 months later, Michael returned to work full-time. His caseload had been distributed while he was on leave, but there was always more financial crime to investigate. His office had sent flowers and cards, but nobody quite knew what to say to him. How do you console someone whose son was tortured as part of a political conspiracy? Tyler met him for lunch on his first day back. How does it feel? His friend asked. Strange. Normal. Like the past year didn't happen. Michael pushed food around his plate. I keep expecting another call, another threat. But it's just quiet. That's good, right? It is. It's just an adjustment. Michael looked up. Thank you, by the way. For everything. I couldn't have done it without you. You would have found a way. Tyler smiled slightly. You're scary when you're motivated. You know that. I've been told. They finished lunch talking about Tyler's work, safe topics, normal things. As they were leaving, Tyler paused. Are you really okay, Michael? Not just saying it. Michael considered the question honestly. Was he okay? His son had been hurt. His marriage had been tested. He discovered he was capable of breaking every rule he'd ever believed in if the stakes were high enough. But his family was safe. The people who'd threatened them were in prison, and life was slowly returning to something like normal. I will be, he said finally. We all will be. And he meant it. 6 years later, Michael stood in the audience at Austin's middle school graduation. His son, 14 now, tall and confident, crossed the stage to accept his diploma, and Michael felt pride so fierce it was almost painful. Austin had survived. More than that, he'd thrived. The therapy had worked, slowly but surely. The nightmares had faded to occasional bad dreams. He was doing well in school, had friends, played on the soccer team. He was a normal kid who'd had something terrible happen to him and had come through it stronger. Katie squeezed Michael's hand. Our boy did it. He did. Michael watched Austin join his classmates, laughing at something one of them said. He really did. That evening, they had a small celebration dinner at home. Austin opened presents, new soccer cleats, a video game he'd been wanting, a telescope for the astronomy class he'd be taking in high school. As the night wound down, Austin pulled Michael aside. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever think about Uncle Sergio? Michael hadn't heard that name spoken in their house in years. Katie had no contact with that side of her family anymore. Her parents had chosen sides, and it hadn't been Sergio's. Sometimes, Michael admitted. Why? I saw a news article. He's getting out of prison next year. Early release for good behavior. Austin's voice was careful, controlled. I just wondered if he might try to contact us. He won't. Michael spoke with absolute certainty. Part of his witness protection agreement is staying away from our family permanently. If he breaks that, he goes back to prison. Good. Austin was quiet for a moment. I don't hate him anymore. The therapist helped me understand he was sick, that what he did wasn't about me. But I don't want to see him either. You don't have to. Not ever, if you don't want to. Okay. Austin nodded. That's all I needed to know. He went back to his friends, and Michael watched him go, marveling at the resilience of children. Austin had taken the worst thing that had ever happened to him and processed it, worked through it, come out the other side as a compassionate, thoughtful young man. That was the real victory, Michael realized. Not the convictions, or the prison sentences, or the destroyed careers. The victory was that Austin was okay, that their family had survived, that they'd found a way forward through the darkness. Later, alone in his office, Michael opened one final encrypted file. A news alert about Patricia Donovan. The former senator had been released from prison after serving 6 years of her sentence. She'd cooperated with further investigations, testified against other corrupt officials, and been granted early release. She was 68 now, her political career destroyed, her reputation in ruins. She'd given an interview to a news outlet, expressing remorse and talking about rehabilitation. Michael read it once, then deleted the alert. She wasn't his problem anymore. None of them were. He had a family to protect, a son to raise, a life to live. The past was finally, truly past. Michael closed his laptop and went downstairs to where Katie and Austin were watching a movie, curled up together on the couch. There was space for him between them, and he took it, pulling his family close. This was what mattered. Not revenge, not justice, not even victory. Just this, the three of them together, safe, healing, moving forward. Everything else was just noise. Outside, the city lights glittered against the night sky. Somewhere in those lights, bad people were doing bad things. Crimes were being committed, conspiracies were being formed, and someone else's family was probably being threatened. But not his. Not anymore. Michael Garner had learned what he was capable of when cornered, when his family was endangered. He'd discovered reserves of ruthlessness and determination he'd never known existed. He'd bent rules, broken laws, and walked right up to the edge of becoming the very thing he'd spent his career fighting. And then he'd stepped back, chosen the legal path, let the system work. Not because he believed in its perfection, but because he believed in himself, in his ability to work within the system when possible, and his willingness to burn it all down if necessary. That knowledge would stay with him. A weapon kept in reserve, hopefully never needed again. Austin laughed at something in the movie, and Katie smiled, and Michael let himself relax into the moment. This was enough. This was everything. The rest was just epilogue. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.